Joining us now are, well, three whistleblowers. One is Kristen Caramo, who is an election observer from Michigan who testified today. Also, Ethan Pease is a U.S. Postal Service contractor from Wisconsin. Jesse Morgan, the truck driver subcontracted by the U.S. Postal Service. Ethan and Jesse have signed sworn affidavits, and both are nonpartisan. Let me ask you both that. You're both nonpartisan. Jesse, Ethan, politics not important to you?
Yeah, I didn't vote this year, so I mean, go ahead, man.
Me personally, I'm not really a Democrat or a Republican. I consider myself maybe an independent or a libertarian.
All right, Ethan, you tell your story. You told a story today that you were working in Wisconsin around Election Day. Your job was to drive ballots to a postal service center. You're nonpartisan, and you said you were told by two separate postal workers on two separate occasions that they were gathering over 100,000 ballots on the morning of November 4th, the day after election, and to backdate those ballots. Can you please tell us that story?
Yes. So let's see, on Election Day, I had no ballots to take on Election Day. The day after the election, I didn't really think anything of it until the Postal Service supervisor asked me if I'd forgotten ballots the night before, and I didn't have any. So I was like, that's kind of a weird question. No. And then he explained to me that 100,000 ballots were supposedly missing in the state of Wisconsin, and an order came down to look for them from the Wisconsin-Illinois USPS chapter of the Postal Service.
Yeah, and by the way, Ethan, you signed an affidavit. You know that if you signed a false affidavit, that you could be charged with perjury, correct?
Yes, sir.
And Jesse, you told the story that, well, from Bethpage, New York, I believe, to Lancaster, PA, you drove almost 300,000 ballots cross state lines that they had, been filled out in Bethpage, New York?
Yes, sir. I don't know exact number ballots. I mean, I really sucked at guess how many jelly beans are in the jar, but I can tell you I took 24 pallets, Gaylords from Bethpage, New York to Lancaster, and that's where.
These were ballots these were Pennsylvania ballots you were bringing in from New York. What was the date of that?
This happened on October 21st. Now, I picked them up in Bethpage, New York, and drove them to Harrisburg. And then from Harrisburg, I drove them to Lancaster, dropped the trailer in Lancaster, dropped my truck off, and went home.
Now, did you get a chance to see those ballots?
I saw them loaded on my trailer.
And did you notice how they were marked, or were they concealed?
I saw that, like, the top corners, addresses on them was filled out, but like I didn't see it on every single one. Like, you know, like it wasn't like I'm sitting there just looking. You know, like I was more so watching to see how the load was put in, make sure it was secure and everything like that. And some of the pallets, when they drove by, some of the letters were up, and I could see like a little bit. I couldn't tell you a name. I wasn't looking for names or anything like that. You know.
And you signed a legal affidavit also. You know that if you lied in that affidavit, you know that, in fact, you could be charged with perjury too?
Yes, sir.
Wow. Why did you both decide, if you're both not partisan, you don't really care about politics, you know, what Ethan motivated you to come forward and tell this story? Why was this important to you?
Well, being that I'm pretty young, I'm only 20 years old, this is clearly probably the most important election of my lifetime. And I couldn't go to the grave knowing what I knew and just keeping that to myself, knowing that something went wrong in this election.
Yeah. Let me bring in Christina Karamos with us. And Christina, your shot went down for a second, so we lost you. We're glad you're back.
Yeah.
You testified today that you witnessed ballots marked straight ticket Democrat Republicans, and you were told that they were to be counted, even if it was Republican, as Democrats. You challenged it. Then you lost the challenge. I mean, these were Republican votes that you saw?
Well, what happened is at the adjudication table, a ballot came up, and it was straight party. The person had voted for straight party Democrat and straight party Republican. And the important part is they were filled in circles. So that's an intentional mark. So like at the adjudication table, if there's some kind of inconsistency, say the person voted for more than they were supposed to for that particular race, or they didn't make it clear or was a mark, that's where they try to figure it out. Well, with the filled in circle, that's an intentional mark. The person didn't make any other votes for, say, judges, proposals, nothing else. And the poll worker just was like, I'm going to give it to the Democrats. And so I'm like, no, that ballot should be tossed out. And this person had previously given a vote to Joe Biden where a voter had voted for Joe Biden and the Green Party candidate for president, and she had given it to Joe Biden. So that's what heightened my attention. And so then after that, I went to go get her supervisor, and her supervisor defers to her and asked the girl, well, what do you think? And I'm discussing, like, what does she think? It doesn't matter. The ballot to be tossed out. And so I go get the guy who was overseeing the 10 p.m. to 5 a.m. absentee counting process, and he does the exact same thing and asked the girl, what does she think? And so I just simply asked the question. I said, well, why not give it to the Republican over the Democrat? And he begins to scream at me and tells her to push it through. Me and him have this big argument, and I'm like, no, I want to challenge this ballot. He's like, you can do what you want. He was extremely nasty, extremely rude, and he just committed open fraud in my face and told her to push the ballot through, which she gave an illegal vote to Joe Biden. And people try to say, well, this is just one incident. No, it's a bunch of incidences, and why do our stories match? We had no way of coordinating these mass stories that all add up. But the Democrats had plenty of time to coordinate their stories. So it doesn't make sense that all of our stories are telling the same type of situations where we witness massive fraud, fake birthdays being given to people and these hand-keying in voters. I mean, why are these voters not on the voter rolls? It just doesn't make sense. Ballots being dropped off in the middle of the night, thousands of them. I mean, it was awful.
You're telling your story. You signed an affidavit also, like Ethan and Jesse, under the threat of perjury, right? You know that's a legal document.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Why was this important to you, Christina? Because I would assume this is kind of not your average day to be a public figure.
Yeah, the thing about it, Sean, is yes, I'm a Republican, but this is beyond Republicans and Democrats. This is about our republic being protected. If we don't have confidence in our elections, we don't have a nation. We give our consent to be governed by those in office, not in power, but in office, to make decisions on our behalf. But if we don't pick the people that are making the decisions on our behalf, then we have a rogue government doing whatever they want to do. That is completely unacceptable. And the way the media won't even take the time to investigate our claims, they just roundly dismissed us. I mean, what kind of journalism that's not even talk to us, not to see what we said? I mean, it's disgusting that a lot of our officials don't want to hear us. We are the citizens. They work for us. Our tax dollars pay them. We tell them what we want, and they are to listen to us. And when you have hundreds and hundreds of people telling you we witnessed fraud, to not even bother to want to hear us, and this is, I mean, we're talking almost a month ago. This should have been talked about as soon as we started complaining, because many of us started filing our affidavits right away. So I'm just really upset about this whole situation.
I want to thank you all for telling your story. I know this is probably not easy for any of you, and it's amazing how one whistleblower, every Democrat and everybody in the media wanted to believe and said was courageous. Now they don't want to hear from anybody else because of politics. That's sad. Thank you all, Christina, Ethan, and Jesse.